Hi, I'm Danny with Tax 29 Tax Service.
And I'm Andy. You know, Danny, the prices of everything keeps going up and up.
Inflation.
Well, at Tax 29, we said enough. We're keeping our pricing structure the same this year as what we had last tax season.
So whether you file in one of our local offices or whether you file with us online at tax29.com, you'll get the same professional tax prep at affordable pricing along with year-round service.
For a list of our pricing or to find out more, stop by one of our local offices or visit us at tax29.com.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the Earth and our universe is really his story.
Welcome to Discovering His Story, a production of Youngstown Christian Television. In this program, we seek to integrate the biblical record with the ancient historical record and see, number one, that the Bible is reliable in its historic accuracy, and secondly, that we find all kinds of information that help us to understand the events of the Bible more clearly. We are in the period of time that we call ancient times, and most recently we have been looking at the Assyrian and Neo-Assyrian empires. The last time we had left King Josiah of Judah, as he has been the one that God used to bring about revival in the nation of Judah, as he had the temple repaired and in the process found a copy of the Torah. And the reading of the Torah, the law, caused revival among the people. And we're about to find out what Josiah did as a result of that. In addition to celebrating Passover, which was a sign of obedience to God, Josiah also rid the land of pagan altars. We find that in 2 Kings chapter 23. Here is a picture of the remains of an ancient pagan altar at the city of Dan. You can see there in the background. And if you can see the upright stones that are placed there, those represent the idol itself that was being worshipped. I thought while we're at Dan, maybe we'd take a quick look around and see an example of an ancient fortified city. This is a picture of the wall at Dan. You can see how the stones are brought together, the rocks are brought together to form that wall. Here is another picture of the altar. You can see the stones there better that represent the gods. This is one of the gates into the city of Dan. This was probably built by King Ahab, whom we have discussed earlier, part of a series of gateways discovered there. And you can see that apparently at one point the wall was either repaired or rebuilt with with stone structures that are more in cubes. Here's how you make a wall out of stone. You use big stones, you use little stones to fill in the gaps. At the city gates, there's always a place for the elders or sometimes the king to sit in judgment. This may have been a podium for the ruler next to the gate, or maybe a place for an idol to be set up. You decide whether I look more like a ruler or an idol. And this is also at Dan. This extends all the way back to the time of Abram. This may in fact be the gate of Dan to which Abram came, that we find in Genesis 14, when Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive. He's talking about Lot, if you remember that. He led out his trained men, born in his house, 318, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So it's possible Abram saw that. Well, let's get back to the time of Assyria and the onslaught of Assyria against the nations around. and particularly against Judah. This is a chronology of the prophets during the time period before the fall of Samaria, which we've already talked about. But just to put these prophets in perspective, we have here the name of the prophet, the king of Judah, and the king of Israel to wit at the same time. So Obadiah, and you can see 845, that's several hundred years before, hundreds of years or so before the time we're in right now. We have Joel, and then followed by Jonah. We've talked about him. And then Hosea. And you can see the kings that were alive during his prophecy. Amos. And we have Uzziah for both of them. Then Isaiah, under 5 different kings of Judah, 2 different ones of Israel. And then the last before the fall of Samaria, the northern kingdom of Israel, was Micah. All right, the question might arise, why did God judge the northern kingdom of Israel through Assyria, but he saved Judah from Assyria? So why did Judah survive? And I think there are a number of reasons that we can see. So let's briefly think about this. First of all, temple worship prospered. Not always, but the temple was still in Jerusalem, which was supposed to be the center of worship for the Israelite people, worship of their God Yahweh. And so God wanted to preserve that. Secondly, there were revivals that took place under Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, and Josiah. We don't find those kind of revivals taking place in Israel, the northern kingdom, because if they had, they would have thrown down the idols that they were worshiping. They would have not continued to go to the cities of Dan and Bethel that had been set up by their first king to worship God. Next, we have the influence of Isaiah and Jeremiah, those 2 great prophets that were in the southern kingdom of Judah. And really importantly, we have the unity of the kingdom because of hereditary dynasty. What we find in the northern kingdom of Israel is one dynasty after another, because sometimes the king would be killed by someone who would take over, a military leader. So there's no continuity throughout the whole thing. And yet in Judah, we have a continuous progression from the line of David. So all the kings of Judah are in that hereditary line. And that not only explains how they're able to have more stability, but also is a part of God's providence over them to preserve that godly line of David, that hereditary line. The next is geography, the natural barriers that Judah had to prevent invasion, which the northern kingdom of Israel did not. The northern kingdom of Israel was wide open to many nations that would invade them. Nearby Syria, based in Damascus, or Assyria coming in, others around from the north. Judah had a little bit better natural fortification. And then lastly, and most importantly, because we are talking about discovering his story, and that is the sovereign determination of God to preserve David's seed, to preserve that hereditary line from David that would ultimately end with the coming of the Messiah, a son of David. So those are some reasons why Judah survived, although, as we will see, they didn't survive as a nation forever. There's going to come judgment upon them as well. But even in that, the line of David is preserved. Before we take a final look at Assyria, I want to tell you something else that's happening at the same time in another part of the world. And for that, we go to India. In India, we have, at this time, the foundation of Hinduism, which were the Upanishads being composed. That was from 800 to 600 BC. So if you wanted to know, well, when did the Hindu religion arise? Well, it's at the same time that we find Assyria conquering the nations around and the taking away of the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay, let's look back now at the progression of the Assyrian Empire. Here's the ascension of Adad-nirati III in the small area called Assyria. Then it gets larger under Shalmaneser III. And you see the expansion under Sargon II. And the extent of the empire by Ashur-nasir-pal II. So you can see how Assyria continued to grow and expand throughout the centuries. And it was a long time. Assyria had a presence in the Middle East for a long time, for several centuries. But within 50 years of its maximum expansion, the latest, the empire collapsed with remarkable speed. Again, why? Why did they collapse so quickly? Well, it was a consequence, first of all, of overextension and material exhaustion in defending far-flung territories against external enemies. The bigger you get, the more territory you have to defend. Egypt freed itself from Assyria even under the reign of Ashurbanipal. Secondly, inattention to maintaining control over the empire. Ashurbanipal moved away from the warlord mentality of his forebears toward a more civilized cultural approach. He ordered the transcription of Akkadian literature masterpieces. However, that's the one thing that he can be known for, is what he did to preserve Akkadian literature. He built a library which housed many, many works of the ancient Near East that we would not have today if it were not for his efforts. He commissioned the production of dictionaries and grammars of the various languages which were spoken in his colossal empire. The library which he built up in Nineveh was by far the largest and most important in the ancient East. He made sure that works were translated into the common Aramaic language from the Akkadian language, which was used by Assyria for important documents, for royal documents. It was the language that only the few understood, scribes used in order to copy things. But the Aramaic language is what was spoken by the common people. And so, and it was a written language that used letters, phonetic letters, rather than those wedge shapes that would form words. It was much easier to write. And Ashurbanipal made sure that all these works were written down, and so we have them today. Without this precious collection, mankind would have been infinitely poorer in its knowledge of the thought and literature of the Fertile Crescent from earliest times. The next reason for its demise was the suppression of internal revolts. Two emerging rivals, Babylon and the Medes, contributed to the process of internal disintegration within the extensive Assyrian Empire. In 626 BC, Babylon revolted and defeated the Assyrians at the borders of Babylonia. Surprisingly, Egypt came to Assyria's aid against Babylon, probably so they could renew their rule over Palestine and Syria. But this did not hold the tide for long. And then lastly, the death of Ashurbanipal in 626 BC resulted in civil war as contenders for the imperial power vied for the throne of Assyria. So in 614, the army of the Medes conquered the city of Ashur, the city of Nineveh in 612, 2 years later. before a combined attack of the Medes and Babylonians. Nineveh was mercilessly sacked and laid waste by the combined armies of the Medes and the Babylonians. And in 610, Haran was also captured, and at that point, Assyria ceased to exist. Well, if you're sad about it, no one at the time was. There were few who mourned Assyria's passing, and many who would rejoice with the prophet Nahum, who wrote, "All who hear the news of you clap their hands at your downfall, for who has not felt your unrelenting cruelty?" Yes, Assyria was cruel, and anybody who ran into them experienced that. No one was sad over their demise. Well, the results of the destruction of Assyria are, first of all, Egypt freed itself from the domination of Assyria, and two emerging rivals, Babylon and the Medes, led to the internal disintegration of the empire. As we've already recounted, in 626 BC, Babylon revolted and defeated the Assyrians. In 614, the army of the Medes conquered the city of Asher. In 616, out of order here, Nineveh fell before a combined attack of the Medes and Babylonians. And in 610, Haran was also captured, bringing the Assyrian Empire to its end. Well, one last trip around the world, and then we'll be finished with this particular part. I wanted you to see other world civilizations at the time. You can locate Assyria there right in the middle of the map in the dark green. You can see in blue, just to the left and up, that Greece has begun to become a dominant force in mostly Europe and some in Asia Minor, including over into the boot of Italy and along the French coast. To the right, to the north, we see the Turks and the Mongols, and you see the arrows indicating the direction in which they are beginning to move. In India, there's a civilization there along the river. Then move all over to the Americas, and you see that there are civilizations at this time taking a role in part of Mexico down through the Central America, which would be the Mayans, the Aztecs and the Mayans, and then in the upper corner of South America, the Incas are beginning to have control and develop a civilization. Now this next slide is a little difficult maybe to decipher without getting in real close and looking specifically, but maybe just glancing over it a little bit, we can see what's going on throughout the world at the time. You can start at the top. You've got Peru, Mexico, the Olmec people, and you drop on down, you see things happening in Italy, the Etruscans you see there partway through, and then you go to the rest of Europe. You see the Druids in Gaul and Britain moving over to the Celtic tribes. Then in Greece, the Dorian migration, and on over to see where the Iliad and the Odyssey are composed, the Olympic Games. We're going to come back and go through all of that, but I want you to see that we're going to have to back up in order to cover Greece, for example. And the same thing will be true of the other areas if we were going to look at India, for example, or China. We've already talked about Egypt and Africa. We see priests from Egypt migrating to Nubia, where they established a theocratic state, and so on. So it's interesting to look at these kind of charts to see what's happening in different parts of the world at the same time, because usually you can't do that. You know, it'd be really as confusing as it might have been just looking at Assyria to try to jump back and forth what's happening other places, aside from my brief mentioning of what's happening in the rest of the world, would have been even more so. A couple more facts about things are happening elsewhere, because I think this guy is so interesting. Thales of Miletus was a Greek philosopher. He's considered the first Greek mathematician and Greek philosopher. He predicted the solar eclipse. He used to think that matters have life. So one odd thing. He was the first to research scientific philosophy and the first mathematician to use deductive reasoning in geometry. And this is the next thing is not on this list that I think is particularly helpful to us, and that is he, in his writings, suggested that the world is in fact round. I'm not sure that he was the first to realize that, and not the last, but it does become the predominant idea, I think, in the centuries to come. One more character that you might be interested in is the name of Zoroaster. He was the founder of the Persian religion called Zoroastrianism. A Persian prophet illuminated by the one god Ahura Mazda. So he stood out in relationship to the polytheistic religions around, and wrote the holy texts Zend-Avesta and the Gathas. Zoroastrianism becomes dominant in the Middle East there, or the ancient Near East, in some ways in the years to come. Well, that takes us to the ending of our mini-series on the Assyrian Empire. But one of the things that we know for sure as you look through history is when one empire dies, oftentimes there's another empire to take its place. And we're going to take a short break and come back and see what is the next empire to arrive on the scene, and what it's going to have to do with the people living in Judah and Jerusalem. And we're going to see a lot of connection there as we come back in just a few moments to Discovering His Story. Welcome back to Discovering His Story. As you remember, we're looking at the period in history we call ancient times, and just finished looking at the civilization, the empire of Assyria. And as we mentioned before, when one empire dies, another one rises to take its place, and that we find as we look at Babylon. Here is the location of Babylon. It's in Mesopotamia, the area between the two rivers. In the middle of two rivers is what the word Mesopotamia means. Mesopotamia has given rise to a number of different civilizations, but as we're looking at it now, we're going to be calling this the New Babylonian Kingdom, or the Chaldean Kingdom. That's to distinguish it from the earlier Babylonian Empire that we had before, which, if you remember, was populated by people called the Amorites. The Amorites were Semites. They're descendants of Shem, cousins of the Israelites, of the Hebrew people. It is the Amorites, maybe not those particular people in Babylon, but Amorites of that tribe that invade Egypt during that one intermediate period, after which, when the Amorites were kicked out, the Hebrews were enslaved, and that's what led to their slavery in Egypt. So this is a different group of people that is now establishing an empire. They're called Chaldeans. And here's a list of the kings we're going to be looking at. Now, if you've been with us through Assyria, it took us a long time to get through the Assyrian Empire and all the kings. It's not going to take that long to get through Babylon. This is it. This is the totality of the kings of Neo-Babylonia, or the Chaldean Empire. And we're not even going to talk about several of them, except maybe to mention it. So this will not take as long, at least from that perspective. Now, there is going to be a lot of interaction between the kings of Neo-Babylonia, or Chaldean Empire, and the kings of Judah, however, the people of God that are there. So this is a list of the kings. And the names are still kind of difficult. And what's going to take place is going to take a lot less time, but maybe more important, actually. All right, so the first king we're going to look at, the founder of the Chaldean Empire, is Nabopolassar. He established the Chaldean or Neo-Babylonian Empire, and you can see that it's the information there in 625 BC. In 612, he finished off the remaining Assyrian threat near the city of Haran, which, by the way, had become the new capital for Assyria. As they were defeated by different armies coming against them, they moved their capital to Haran as their new base of operations, and eventually the Chaldeans defeated them there as well. In 605, he sent his son, Nebuchadnezzar II. Now we know him simply as Nebuchadnezzar, and we'll probably refer to him that way, but in reality there was one before him, someone of little note. But Nebuchadnezzar II was sent by his father Nabopolassar to do battle with the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptian leader at that time was named Necho, technically Necho II. But the first Necho, we don't need to be concerned about. Necho II had moved northward to aid the fallen Assyria against the new power, the Neo-Babylonian Empire under Nebuchadnezzar. Now, if you remember that this took place as Assyria was getting weaker and weaker, and this new power has come on the stage, the Chaldeans. Traditionally, Egypt had been under the authority of Assyria and had fought to get away from that, but now all of a sudden they're allying themselves with Assyria. And that seems kind of strange, and you would wonder, why did that happen? Well, it's probably because Necho could see that the Chaldean Empire was the one that was growing in strength and eventually would want to come and conquer Egypt. So in order to forestall that, Necho decides to help the old enemy Assyria to hold off these Neo-Babylonians so that maybe Assyria can gain enough power to be able to counteract this new empire that is building. Well, as Necho is moving north to assist the Assyrians, the king of Judah is the one we call the boy king, Josiah. He's no longer a boy at this point. This is towards the end of his life and reign, as we are going to quickly see. He came out to stop Necho from helping the Assyrians. Now, it's hard to know why he would do this, whether there was some kind of a secret agreement between him and Nebuchadnezzar or Nabopolassar. We don't know. But he goes out to fight against Necho and to prevent him from marching through Judah on his way to fight Nebuchadnezzar. And Necho warned him, I have nothing against you, Josiah. Don't come out against me. I'm on my way somewhere else. Don't try to interfere. But Josiah did not listen. And as a result, Josiah lost his life in the attempt. So, Josiah has been killed in battle. What's going to happen next to the nation of Judah and the city of Jerusalem? We'll find out next time on Discovering His Story.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the earth and our universe is really his story.
Hi, I'm Danny with Tax 29 Tax Service.
And I'm Andy. You know, Danny, the prices of everything keeps going up and up.
Inflation.
Well, at Tax 29, we said enough. We're keeping our pricing structure the same this year as what we had last tax season.
So whether you file in one of our local offices or whether you file with us online at tax29.com, you'll get the same professional tax prep at affordable pricing along with year-round service.
For a list of our pricing or to find out more, stop by one of our local offices or visit us at tax29.com.